So I hear exactly what you're saying, and I can guarantee you that a lot of times it's cyclical.
Yep, definitely. And one of the other things I was just curious about, I was actually reading earlier today, there's a young lady, and this is a different topic, but some degrees there are somewhat related, but she was the survivor of, not sexual abuse, but a survivor of Columbine. And she actually lives here in North Carolina now. She lives in Cary, North Carolina, which is just between Durham and Raleigh and everything. But she was talking about some of the things that she has to do in terms of, she now has kids. And I know you have, I believe your daughter, who's a very much a proponent and supporter of yours in terms of Denim Day. And I saw the picture on Facebook of your son and everything. So I was wondering, as a survivor, how much of what you went through are you able to share with your kids? How much are you able to let them know what you went through? How much has it impacted their lives? Like I said, I definitely have seen on that Cerise show how much active your daughter was. She surprised you and was even up early in the morning on a Sunday to let you know that she was listening to the show and everything. So, and I saw the son. He looked like he kind of, I'm not sure if he lives with you or not, but definitely looks like he's definitely a nice gentleman and everything. But I just didn't know how much of the conversation you have had with them and how that plays out. Because one of the things that she talked about was that, you know, that she seemed to be very honest about what she went through with Columbine. I'm sure she's a little bit more guarded with her family because, like I said, when she was their age, because I think one of them is a teenager now, that's when the shooting happened. Because that was 20 years ago yesterday, I believe, because I believe it was on the 20th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So, you know, this is like the piece that makes me incredibly emotional, because when I got married after everything happened, and this happened to me 25 years ago, and when I got married, I was really hesitant about having children because I was very, very fearful about what they would have to go through having a mom who had some mental health issues, who had PTSD, who suffered from anxiety, who got triggered a lot. And I was really nervous about that. And when I finally decided to tell my children, my son was probably 8 or 9, my daughter was probably 10, and I began to share little bits and pieces with them, more so with my daughter because she was a little older than my son. And it just so happened about 7 years ago, so my son is 16, going to be 17 right now, and my daughter's 18. I received an award and for my work with Denim Day, and they wanted to do a video montage. And I realized that I had to tell my children pretty much everything that had happened because it was going to come out in this video montage. And, you know, I was really concerned with how much should they know? Is this going to be okay? Are they going to understand? You know, what kind of questions are they going to ask? And, you know, their reaction was pretty much, you know, Mom, you're amazing. We're so proud of you. And then the second part was, oh, well, this makes so much sense now. No wonder you get startled at loud noises. No wonder we can't have toy guns in the house. No wonder we can't sneak up on you and surprise you. All of these things that they had literally dealt with for the first 8-9 years of their lives completely began to make sense to them as to why I was the person that I was. And that was really relieving for me, and I think it was relieving for them. You know, and yeah, go ahead.
He said, and I don't know if you're still married or not, but I was just wondering what impact did that have on the gentleman that is, I don't know if he's now your husband or was your husband when you got involved with him, because I imagine that probably had to present some interesting challenges as well, just getting involved back in a relationship after you had been through such a traumatic event yourself.
Yeah, so I had, you know, I suffered some pretty bad, I would say, coping mechanisms after I had been raped, and I had met my husband about 4 years after everything had happened. And I had previously dated a couple of guys and told them what happened to me, and it did not go well. And a lot of times guys would think oh, you're used and abused, and oh, yuck, I wouldn't want to be with somebody who's had that happen to them. And my husband, who is my current husband actually, and tomorrow we leave to go to Hawaii to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. So we have been together for the past 20 years, and it's going very well. But he was very, he handled the situation so well and just basically said, it doesn't matter to me. It makes sense, why sometimes we need to leave places, and I don't care. And that was, again, really relieving to me that I could have somebody who would support me like that. And, he actually is probably one of my biggest supporters. He's the quiet guy behind the scenes. He won't stand up on a soapbox, but he'll nail together a sign, he'll paint a banner, he'll, hang up jeans on the side of a fence. He'll do anything that he can to support me, but on the back end of things. And that's how my son is too.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like you have a very dynamic family, because one of the things that, like I said, I had seen the picture of you and your daughter, and, this has nothing to do with the way that they are and everything, but one of the things that caught me off guard, because I wasn't expecting it when I saw the picture of your son, was that you have to deal with so many issues in your family, because it is clearly apparent that he is of at least some African-American descent, your son is, so you have to deal with everything from the politics of being a sexual abusive survivor to interracial relationships to all kinds of stuff that are involved in there. And I know Milwaukee because I went to school at Milwaukee. I went to Marquette many years ago, so I know that Milwaukee is somewhat of a liberal town. I mean, Howard Fuller is definitely an activist there, and is the reason that I went to Marquette. But I also know that it also has some conservative sides as well, because one of the things I remember about Milwaukee was the division of the city and everything, where you went to one side. I don't know if it's still that way, but I remember when you went to one side, you were heading toward the Puerto Rican and Latin side. You went to another side, you were definitely more in the African American community. You went somewhere else, you were definitely more in the German kind of community. And then downtown was kind of where everybody mixed together, and definitely during Summerfest and some of the other things that are more downtown UWM oriented and Marquette oriented. But I just remember that people talk about how divisive the South is, but I remember Milwaukee had its own kinds of divisions and everything.
Yeah, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the entire country. And my oldest son, who is 19, he has, faced a lot of difficulties himself. Growing up, he didn't have a whole lot of people to support him, and we happened to live across the street from him, and just sort of took him in, and so grateful for that. He's an amazing kid, and but he faces a lot of adversity, and it's a different world being an African American man than it is being any other race or any other gender, and I see that with him all the time.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's definitely a different world that we live in and everything. I don't want you to go anywhere, Doug, because I do want people to learn more about how they reach you and everything. But I think I have one more guest that I had to get to, but definitely if you can hold on. Dean, do we still have Dusty there?
We do, and he'll be on in just one
Are you enjoying the smoothest conversation in podcasting? Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. Hi, this is DJ Smooth Jazz, syndicated radio host and co-owner of Portfolio Group, LLC, your smooth jazz lifestyle and entertainment group with offices in Durham, North Carolina. Portfolio Group, LLC specializes in promoting the lifestyle of smooth jazz listeners with the promotion of smooth jazz events and the distribution of African American-owned wines. For more information, portfoliogroupllc.com, or you can swing by my secondary site, djsmoothjazz.com. Now back to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark.
And we are back. Mr. Staub, you are on the line with Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. Good evening, sir.
I'm doing well. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Doing good. This is Mark over here. Dusty, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about your background and everything? Like I said, we've had a very dynamic conversation today. We've had two activists on, my friend Dante Strobino, who I've known for a number of years, who's definitely very much involved in labor activism and just activism in general. And then, of course, we had the gentleman with the internet company. And then we've had Dawn on, who is definitely talking about being a sexual abuse survivor, as well as Denim Day, which is a national and international holiday to honor those that have been in those kinds of relationships or situations. I don't even want to call them relationships. But if you would share a little bit about your life and what you're all about.
All right, Mark, thank you. And I would just say, listening to Dawn and her conversation with you, that Straight Talk is a really good name for this casting, this podcast. I'm an Army brat. I grew up, for 17 years of my life was in the military. My father, it was Captain Staub's residence, Dusty speaking, how may I help you, sir? Major Staub's residence, Dusty speaking, how may I help you, sir? Lieutenant Colonel Staub's residence, Dusty speaking, how may I help you, sir? I was in 10 different schools the first 10 years of schooling. And I got bullied a lot because I was first that damn Army brat, and then in England, in 3 different places, I was the damn Yank. And by 5th grade, I became a practical psychologist because I wasn't the warrior my father was. I was more of a poet and a lover, and I had to figure out how to deal with bullies. And I found a strategy that worked, and that got me on the path of psychology. I began to realize if you can understand people's motivation and you can understand their behavior and their fears, then there are ways in which you can work with them that diffuses that. And when you do that, you actually gain allies rather than enemies. And it's something that hasn't happened. They haven't figured out in Washington, D.C. Recently, unfortunately. And there are times when you need to stand up to bullies, and there are times when the bullies themselves are often people who have been bullied or belittled. They've faced sexual depredation. They've faced all kinds of issues. And so meeting fear with fear, or meeting fear with anger, or meeting anger with anger doesn't always work. So I got interested as a practical psychologist, and so I became a marital and family therapist. I ran crisis centers for a while. And since 1990, I've been running an organization called Staub Leadership International. And what we do is we focus on wholehearted leading. And the whole focus is liberating the purpose and the passion and the power of individuals, teams, and organizations.
So it sounds to me like you could definitely relate to a lot of what our other callers were talking about. You mentioned that you could relate to what Dawn's doing with Denim Day, and definitely it seems to me that probably a lot of the leaders that you are working with are probably coming out of the activism community. They're probably coming from organizations kind of like what Dawn has done, turning her life around after having been abused many years ago and everything in that brutal attack, or even kind of like the way that Dante is letting folks know that the workers do need to stand up. So it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is right along the lines of what they're already doing in their lives.
Exactly. They're claiming their power in this world. I learned something, Mark, when I was a young therapist that came to me as I was working with people, which was no one can do it for you. No one can do it for you. You got to have the courage to step out there. You got to have the courage to say, I'm not going to be a victim. This is where it stops. And yet you can't do it by yourself. We all need help, whether it's a support group, whether it's a cohort, whether it's a team, whether it's a enlightening podcast that gets us to be talking more honestly and openly with each other. No one can do it for you, and you can't do it by yourself. And so it's the courage to put ourselves out there on the line, and it's also the courage to be vulnerable and open to others. And that requires, and that sounds like certainly Dawn has mastered that from what I heard listening in. And I just admire people who have gone through abuse, gone through difficulty, and say, this is not going to define me. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to claim my power and step forward in the world. I'm going to create a love, and I'm going to create a life that I can be proud of. And that's true whether it's workers uniting or whether it's somebody who has been a victim of sexual violence or any form of violence. Fortunately, I never went through that myself. I just went through the physical violence and the fear that went with that, knowing every time we moved I was going to get beat up.
Wow. And we know that bullies is still a very important part of what goes on in our lives. We see it in our school systems even to this day, and a lot of times the bullies are coming out of a very interesting place themselves. Now, Dawn, if you're still there, how important was it for you to get, I imagine you probably had to go through some psychological help and deal with psychiatrists when you were going through this in order to get to this kind of place that you're at right now? Because I agree with what Dusty is saying. You are definitely in a very balanced place, and not everybody is. So how long did it take before you could get to that place, and how important was it for you to get that kind of help from our professionals?
Yeah, and Dusty, I really appreciate everything that you just said, and I entirely agree.